Call the meeting to order. Please call the roll.
Councilwoman Gregory. Councilman Horn. Councilman Kuehl.
Mine is.
Councilman Cooper. Councilman Culp.
Here.
Councilman McDaniel.
Present.
Mayor Moore-Wolf.
Present.
6 present, 1 absent.
Do you want to do a quick check again of the mics, Pat?
Yes, I'm working.
Yes.
Good evening.
Hello. Yep,
And Mr. Manager, does yours work?
I think so.
That would be pretty important. Okay. If you would all join us with the Pledge of Allegiance. Tonight's meeting is a study session, and study sessions are less formal meetings of the City Council called to discuss broad policy themes and obtain input from the governing body about proposals and initiatives that are still being developed. No formal votes are taken at study sessions, and no informal directions expressed at study sessions bind the City Council or its individual members to vote in a certain matter at a certain future City Council meeting. Members of the public should limit their remarks to 3 minutes, and that will come after council discussion. The topic of tonight's study session is the fiscal year 2025 budget discussion, and I'm going to turn it over to the city manager.
Thank you, Mayor, and to the council. We're not at that slide yet, so yeah, but let's keep it at this one. And to the community more so. While there has been some prep conversations with council, they've received the proposed budget books. That is a working document, and definitely, we're on schedule. This is the kickoff meeting where we are talking, at a high level, and we'll drill down into some of these specific areas that council takes us with the questions this evening. I also want to, this is my first budget back, or as the new city manager. And hopefully it resembles and meets the expectations of council. But this kickoff meeting is going to be presented by all of the directors in one evening. And hopefully it will be very succinct, efficient, and then leave a little bit more time so that we can respond to questions, comments, direction from council. If tonight does run long, or if there are follow-up questions that we don't have the answers to, we fully expect to use the meeting next Monday, a regular council meeting, on October 21st to, follow up. So we would add that as an agenda item, but I'm not doing that until I see the outcome of this evening. So this does, like I just shared, this kicks off the 2025 budget for the community. We're obviously under a calendar fiscal year that we follow, and not all municipalities do that. Some start May 1st and April 30th and so on, July 1st, June 30th. But for here at the City of Decatur, we follow a calendar year. Before I turn this over to the directors, I do have a few opening comments, in addition to what I had just shared up to this point. I want to speak, and I think it's important to speak to where we're at currently with our FY24 budget. Council's aware of this. It's been said publicly a couple of times, in some of the conversations that I've had, I think most recently at a chamber luncheon. But the city, I think the community is aware that, during COVID, we received nearly $35 million in COVID funds, 34.9 million to be exact. That was the first time that we were able to use a substantial amount of funding towards community development, neighborhood revitalization. I think it's one that the community is, very encouraged by what the city has done at the direction of council and the staff producing this. So we have never used local taxpayer dollars to meet any of our demolitions, as an example. Early on, it was some of the Howard G. Buffett Foundation money. There was $1 million originally, I think back in 2019, 2020. And then also you had the Johns Hill development and redevelopment, in this case, that the Howard G. Buffett Foundation money paid for. And then COVID happens. And again, we received $34.9 million. Well, those funds are gone. And in fact, we've overspent those funds, and to the tune of about $3.5 million. So this council is going to have to reconcile the current budget at the end of the fiscal year, and that's going to be to the tune of about $3.5 million. While we think that the options that I'll put in front of council do not include our cash reserves, that we have a 90-day supply, there's a couple of line items that we have, that we feel that we can reconcile this. How did this happen? There's a number of reasons, but I'll tell you one thing that I did when I got here is all things related to what I will call Fund 84, the neighborhood revitalization. We ended all expenditures and allowed for no new expenditures as of August 31st. So that's just a quick comment because it does touch into the FY25 conversation, but that's a quick comment about today. Another thing on the horizon, and even though it's not going to be a part of the FY25 budget, I'm one of these people, as some in the community can attest to this. I like to be as transparent as I possibly can be about taxpayer dollars. One, because I'm cut from that cloth. Two, because this council expects that of me. Also, you have Ruby James as our new finance director, and have found in a very quick 5 months that she's cut very much from the same cloth, where we can't talk enough about how we are using taxpayer dollars. And with that said, so on the horizon, we have many infrastructure needs currently. And again, it's not a topic for the FY25 budget. I just want to put this on everybody's radar, that we have a rate structure that likely will not sustain some of the infrastructure improvements that we're going to need, sewer, water, those types of funds. So that day is coming, and it's likely a conversation for a newly seated council at some point in calendar year 25 for future budgets going out. So FY25, want to speak to some of the things that I think council hired me to address, and that is, one is the concern that we have as an employer of how many employees that we are losing. We're not recruiting well at all compared to some of our competitors, and that's become a priority. And the idea of being an employer of choice. We have a good benefit package, we really do. Decatur is a very affordable place to live when you look at all of those things, but you do not get to that point unless you have a competitive salary. So the focus is in 25 is about trying to find that competitive starting wage that puts us within a 10% range of our comparable communities. A comparable community is the city of Champaign, the city of Bloomington in size. Now the economy might not be the same, and I've shared this with council, and again more so for the community, and I said this at a chamber event. We have got a very dedicated of the staff that is a tenured, seasoned staff. We have a staff that fully recognizes that our economy may not be the same as some of our neighbors to the north and to the east and, other directions. But they also want to be as competitive as we possibly can so that we can build, a seasoned, tenured organization to meet the needs of the city. So with that said, a methodology of trying to be within 10% of a starting wage, a starting salary to comparable communities. The first collective bargaining agreement that we were able to address was police. And it's a 4-year agreement. That first year was year 7 because that's what it took to get us within that starting salary range to comparable communities that will allow Chief Brandell and his executive team, truly the entire department, to be that marketing team to try to recruit qualified recruits. Next, we have scheduled AFSCME negotiations, and then right after that is fire. All 3 of the contracts that we have here locally in December 31st. A goal, if we can achieve this, is to have those contracts settled before they would even end, and then be effective January 1st of 2025. And then I'm not going to forget about all the non-union employees that we have that are not represented by collective bargaining agreements, but have the very same challenges when we try to recruit various positions that we have. So at some point in the near future, I plan on executing a salary study so that we can find that competitive point with all the different non-union positions that we have. Something else that, in this budget for 25, have budgeted across the board a 5% increase, which is a little bit higher. I know I just mentioned 7% for police, but you're going to see a varying between all the different levels, the employee levels, and we felt that 5% was a good number to plug into this FY25 budget. Also knowing that every single year you capture some of the savings because of vacancy savings, and we use that typically as we're working through any given fiscal year. Community development, and I'm going to circle back to this Fund 84. What I was just talking about using ARP funds for is what does it look like in FY25? What we have plugged into the FY25 proposed budget is $2.5 million. It's not much in the scheme of things compared to the amount of money that we've spent over the past couple of years, but we can't not do anything, and I think Council agrees with that, but also running parallel to a number that Council will ultimately approve or not is the idea that we need to stand up a formalized plan. We need to understand what we're doing related to neighborhood revitalization, community development. You've got the Director of Economic Community Development is Cordell Patrick, and I'm going to say he's probably not had the kind of conversations with the community, with the elected officials like he has wanted to in the past. It's a new day. That's going to change. It has to, because we are now using local taxpayer dollars to fund this very important need in our community. And it's a funding level at whatever point, really working through, in my mind, FY25 as we formalize a plan. And it's also a plan that does not just include, the most dire parts of the community, the ones that have needed the most. It's these other parts of the community that, a little bit of TLC, if you will, might change the trajectory that we're in. And I would probably contend that the reason that some of the parts of the community that we're focused on with ARP funds is it was an easy eventual justification when the audit someday comes with the use of ARP funds. The demographics drove sort of that investment is what I would suspect. But now that we're using local taxpayer dollars, you're going to see a shift where this is a larger focus within the community. So that day is also coming. Revenues, projecting a modest increase with revenues. We're going to have Ruby will speak to that, and we think that our expenses are also very appropriate, and the tax levy, if you would, slide to that. So I want to talk about the tax levy, and this is something that, again, a decision is not going to be made tonight, and will actually be made, if I'm not mistaken, at the December 2nd meeting. But we start the publication, the notices, and work through the budget schedule. But this right here, it is, I think, a great slide where it shows what your property tax dollars go to. And if you see at the far left, and it can't be seen that well, I know that we plugged 16% into the budget books, but really that number is 15.2%. So that's what's represented up on the screen right now. So you've got those other taxing bodies. You've got the Park District, public schools, is the one that receives the most out of property tax dollars, and our portion is 15.2%. Council action in the past has, while we have seen a true increase in the property values in this community, which is a great thing, Council last year cut the property tax rate, and there was a loss. So what is in the budget books, and ultimately it will be for Council to decide, are three options: a 5% option, a 9% option, and a 2022 rate option. And what that does is it captures the loss that was not captured from the property value increase last year, along with the property value increase this year. And while it might look like a major number, and it's 12.8%, if you walk through what that means to an average valued home at $134,500, that would be an increase of $50 per year. And that is a number, I get that. But if you divide that over the course of 12 months, that's about $4 a month. And all these $50 increases, they add up and they make a major difference. But that is the highest option, and Council can do whatever they want ultimately, and it does not need to be decided this evening. But that is the highest option that was provided to Council. The 5% option is one where we actually are still lowering our property tax rate for the city's portion. And then also the 9% option is truly the one that I'm going to recommend. And you would see probably about a $35 increase for that average valued home in this community of $134,500. So that's about $2 a month. I'm sorry, that would be $3 a month over the course of a year. And those $35 multiplied by all the different residences and commercial properties, it truly makes a difference. And so that's just, that's just a quick kickoff before we turn this thing over to the directors. I've got a timer. Unlike public, similar to public comment, but the directors are queued up to be able to present at a high level, be very efficient. This is not an annual report type of presentation where we're talking about the many great things that the individual departments do. We're going to focus on the FY25 budget. Now, the questions that Council asks, you can take this any direction you want, but we've got 5 to 7 minutes for each one of the directors. You're going to see a couple of new faces. I don't think French Wilson, our HR director, Corporation Counsel, Wendy Morthland, while you do see her all the time, she typically does not present for her department that she's responsible for. And it probably won't take a lot of time, but this is also an opportunity for us to show off the director staff that we have at the community, at the city. And it's something that I want the community to get to know the directors that lead these individual departments. So with that said, I think next item, Jim, and we're rolling into, appearance of citizens. Okay, that's what I thought. And then what I'm going to do, so I've talked about the 24 tax levy, the options that we threw out for council consideration. The 9% option is the one that I and staff are proposing, and we're going to walk into the director presentations. We're going to start out with, Ruby, are you starting out? Okay, now see, now you're not on my list here. I've got John Kinseth on here as first. But I think we're going to do the finance director first. So Finance Director Ruby James, and I'm going to not start any timer for you. I'm gonna wait, so go for it.
French told me I could borrow some of her time, so it'll be all right. We're going to start with the revenue section, page 17. And I'm going to borrow from the highlights that were provided to you. I'm going to go over the revenue, and the expenses I will leave to each of the directors to talk about in their area. Really, not a lot has changed in the budget, so this should be a fairly easy budget to present, and if you have questions, there'll be plenty of time for that. In the revenues, we are looking at basically what is going on in the economics this year. In 2024, the 2 years prior to that had increased 3 to 4% for most of the revenue items. And then we came to this year, and you might remember in April and May, we started talking about that we see the revenues are not coming in as much as we had budgeted. And so we see this year coming in at more like 1 to 2% for a lot of the revenues, except for the Illinois state income tax. And that we budgeted at 3%. So by and large, a lot of the revenues are budgeted based on where we project this year and going up about 1 to 2%. And that is where we saw this year come in at. And so we view the economics based on where we see interest rates and inflation and so forth, and where we're seeing consumer spending, where they're putting their dollars, and looking at this year versus an average of 3 years. Because you could look at an average of 3 years, but we don't see that happening this year. So we feel like it is a better practice to look at next year and do the 1 to 2%. PPRT is the personal property replacement tax. Illinois has decreased that 20% the last 2 years. They're going to decrease it. They decreased it this year 20% and next year 20%. And that is a significant decrease. So back in 2023, we received $2.7 million. In 2025, we have heard from the state that we're going to get more like about $1.2 million, $1.4 million. And so that is what we have put in the budget. So, $1.4 million. It's a $1.2 million decrease. So that is very significant to our budget. And that is in there. And by the way, during this year, the state decreased it again. So that could go down, but we've been told that we're going to get $1.4 million. So revenue in 2024, normally we would budget $3.4 million. And revenue is currently budgeted in 2025 at $1.5 million. So that's a change from prior years in what we normally get. So we have a decrease in revenue coming up. And at that, I'm going to pause on revenues if there are questions.
Chuck?
What is the state doing with the PPRT money that's not coming to us?
So they started out at a large increase over time about 3 to 4 years ago, and then they realized probably they over budgeted that, and now they're decreasing it significantly. And plus the state is looking for money because they're short on money as well. So essentially they're decreasing what they're giving out is a short answer.
Other questions on that? Dr. Horn?
Ms. James, I have a question about revenue associated with property taxes. Last year, we essentially had the percentage increase, which was from new development, renovations, and annexations. What is that percentage for the upcoming year?
Approximately, that would still be about the 3%. It holds fairly steady and consistent. We are hoping over time that the commercial increase from that will increase over time as we have brought new businesses to the community, but that has not seen a large increase yet. So in essence, that's going to be in the neighborhood of 3% again, is the estimation.
Other questions? Okay, you can keep going.
All right, so now I'm going to move on to the financial area, and really all I have to say about that, not a lot changed in the finance budget. It is hard to discern how much the audit fees increased because we had an overlap between last time's auditor and the new auditor, Sikich. There was a 5% there will be a 5% increase in audit fees with Sikich, which in my experience is pretty common. We are on page finance, Anthony. 41. Thank you, 41. And actually where the numbers are would be, because there's some write-up, will be 45. And so the audit services There was a larger amount spent in 2023 and 2024 again because we had the old auditors mixed in with the new auditors, but the increase will be 5%, which will be a large savings over the prior years. And the SICKage has been a tremendous help, and when we bring the audit to you, we will go over that. We are cleaning up a lot of things, and we hope to have the audit in either late October or early November. It's looking like early November at this point, but they've been a tremendous help. And not a lot else has changed in the finance area, and I actually wanted to spend my time going over page 50, which is not something you've actually had described to you. But since I have the time and don't have a lot of changes in the finance area, I wanted to go over the transfers to other funds. I'm sure this is an area you probably have not had much discussion about before. And actually with that, as I called back to my partner back there, I wanted to call out Anthony Cooling is our Budget and Revenue Officer, who is the author behind all of this, and recognize his good work because there is a lot of information in here, and Anthony knows it off the top of his head and makes sure that all this information is correct and included in here. So thank you to Anthony for all his good work. If we go down on page 50 to, there's a lot of detail on transfer to other funds. And if you look at about the first 3 line items and sprinkled throughout, there's some building fund items. And with that, we wanted to outline to you that we are trying to budget some facility updates. And as we know that things need fixed, we're trying to outline those there and transfer that to the building fund, make sure that gets done. And then vehicles, you see police department vehicles, planning department vehicles, public works, et cetera. Those are for vehicles, obviously, and equipment. We're trying to outline that for you. Debt service transfer. That is for the debt service that would not be the water fund, would not be included in the tax levy. So that is the debt service that belongs to the general fund. So you see that's $1.47 million. The interfund loan. This is a loan that was made several years ago from the water fund for capital projects for street lighting. This is going to pay off that loan that was made, and it's funded from the general fund, and it was a borrowing from the water fund, paying the water fund back, and this is the final payment for that loan. And then, again, we have some building fund. You see the MSC roof and library. That is going to be $675,000 for that payment. And transfer to community redevelopment. This is the Fund 84 that the city manager talked about. There's $2.1 million being funded from the general fund to Fund 84 that the city manager talked about of $2.1 million right here. I just want to point out these are big numbers, and I want you to know where they're going and what they're for. And the opioid treatment money, I should point out, is money we receive from the government to be redistributed, which we have not brought to you. We show there's some spending there, but we need to bring you proposals as to what that spending might be for. But we put it in the budget to be ready to bring you proposals in the future. Now, it is. It's not out of our pocket. It would be money that we already have received, and we would come to you with proposals about what we might do with that government money, yes.
But it's not government. It's from people, pharmacy companies.
Settlements.
Yeah.
Thank you for the correction.
Dr. Horn?
Ms. James, approximately how much money is the city going to spend with pilot this year? Payment in lieu of taxes?
Anthony, do you know how much in total?
It's about 2.5 to 3 million.
Ms. James, can you repeat that? So the people at
2.5 to
home-
3 million.
Thank you. Ms. James, on the senior center contract,
Yes.
we had been, the Park District had requested a significant increase in funding this last year, which the council agreed to. I mean, is this just going to be for a couple of years, or are they expecting us to every year fund it around $100,000? Do we know?
What I remember of the conversation, and the deputy city manager can correct me from his memory, but I understood in order to run the facility, they were needing that much money in order to do the work that was needed. Yeah, and I'm getting a yes. And that's all I have for my section.
Other questions for Ms. James? Okay. Think you can be ruled safe.
Additional comment for the council. In this FY25 proposed budget, and I meant to mention this as I was talking about the shortfall in the FY24. That's if council reconciles at a future council meeting, it will avoid using cash reserves. But this budget before council tonight, you're looking at roughly a 6% increase over last year to the operating budget, somewhere in the mid 90 million, 95, $96 million for what's being proposed. That is about a $4.2 million shortfall because what is being presented to council, the only increase or what could be viewed as an increase is on the property tax side. Other than the normal built-in increases to some of the fees and the rates, there is nothing additional that I am proposing to council, currently, that could change in a future conversation before we finalize this budget. But there was never, a thought that we were going to increase different things that is on the backs of the individual residents. So I wanted to make that very clear. So where does that $4.2 million come from? And the recommendation is a cash reserve, unobligated cash reserve transfer. And that would take our 90-day reserve down to roughly 70 days and just completing that point. Also, additionally, you see a modest increase, so it's not just in salaries, trying to put us in a position to be that employer of choice. There also are 15 full-time positions that I believe are necessary to the organization, with the overwhelming majority of those being public safety. So, wanted to make that point. I had lost that on my notes that I wanted to present to council.
And if I could back up for just one moment. And I appreciate the partnership that we have with the Park District. We work really well with them on a number of things. But I guess my concern is, they are in charge of parks and recreation, and they are also a taxing body that gets almost as much money as the city. And so I don't know that it's really the best practice for us to be not just funding some of their programs. I mean, I'm not against the senior center. I think it's a really good center. We were out there serving lunch not long ago. I think it's a really good operation, but I just have a little bit of hesitancy about, that being, we gave them a significant jump when we haven't given other things that are more in line with us, such as economic development, a significant boost. So it's just something I think we need to be cognizant of, because it's kind of like those are the same taxpayers, it's just coming from a different source, which is us. Pat?
On that, I think I brought this up one other time, because I remember sitting out in the audience when we were funding, a lot of the programs for the seniors, the city did it. And then we passed it on to the senior center, because some of that was federal money that would be transferred. So we started giving that money, the federal money, to the senior center to take over those programs. So is that federal money coming in anymore, or we're paying for it?
I think that was the Office on Aging, if I remember
Well,
correctly.
I
And when the
don't
city
remember.
stopped having that, it was kind of the deal was, and I may be misremembering this, but we were giving them a straight $60,000 a year
Right.
fee. And then, I kind of expected with the consolidation of some of these senior centers that they would be more efficient and, but I mean, it's an excellent center. They're building a new facility. They've got a lot going on, and our population is aging, so it is needed. I just feel like we're somewhat double dipping.
I can't make a remark. I didn't know whether when to say this, but the city manager brought up some things, and Ms. James, none of you were in this council chamber back in 2002. I was. That's when the city was in dire financial straits. That's when they enacted 5 temporary taxes. Well, when government comes up with a tax, it's not temporary. And that would be the food and beverage, motel, hotel tax, utility, and I forget the others too. But they were in dire financial strait. What we're hearing from the Ms. James, and we've already know the state's giving us less money, municipalities. And I've mentioned this before, I don't know for sure, but I've been lived in Illinois long enough. They're going to be taking more. They've taken our food, or our 1% tax, food tax, but they're going to be hurting for money because they're not going to have that COVID money coming in from the federal government. So we got to be realistic. Nobody wants increases, but everybody wants the services, and you can't do both and be realistic. So I just thought I'd tell you, because I was sitting up there as a citizen, and they struggled, but they came up with those 5 different taxes and that. And so, like you said, we can increase fees if we have to, whatever, or come up with some other reasons, ways to raise some money to do the basic services in that. So thought I'd throw that out.
Chuck?
City Manager, I just wanted to ask you about the 15 new positions, specifically the police department. I think there were 7 new positions, and so you had talked about vacancy savings, and so my question is, these 7 positions, are they above the full-time police staffing that we've been short on every year? It seems like, we were down, I forget how many police officers, 7, 10, whatever it was. So now, will this be full staff from what we had, plus an additional 7 more? Is that where you're going with this?
It is, and when the chief comes down, he can clean up anything that I might misspeak on right now. But when I was here 2015 to 2018, we were at about 162, 163 sworn. You've lost 15 positions since then, but the call load keeps going up, the severity of crime keeps going up. The depth of investigation that's required to solve some of the crimes has gone up. So this 148 is putting us back at 155-ish in that range, half as much to where we were 6-7 years ago. 2 of those 7 positions will be supervisory. You got a very young department, and you've got a young supervisory staff, and this is trying to meet those supervisory needs out on the streets. Something else that I'm going to comment to, and the 12-hour shifts that the union and the police administration, ultimately council being a part of this decision, that is the most efficient patrol type of schedule that you can possibly have. Probably bought us some time compared to a traditional 3 8-hour shifts or some sort of blend with a couple of 10-hour shifts. This department on these public safety positions, they're in need of this. And something else, that I'll say, across the board, and hopefully this resonates, because there's an integrity in this process as we are presenting this budget to council. And I respect the fact that at the end of the day, council gives me my marching orders. But when I'm talking to the directors, and just a rough example, I ask them, what do you need? And ask for the justification. And if the number is 4, you better not come to me and say I need 7, because this is not a negotiation with me. There's credibility involved in this. But also, I've got directors that sort of can read the tea leaves, see that we're in a tough budget challenge, and they might come in and say we only need 2 when the number is really 4. We're going with 4, and we're going to see if we can get this adopted. So that's also an approach that I feel is important to share with. I know council knows I'm really talking more so to the community that's listening in.
Dr. Horn, did you have a comment or question?
I had both, Mayor. First, I'm very supportive of the senior center. And, when you think about some of the things we fund, including CONO, Regional Chamber of Commerce, Economic Development Corporation, Senior Center, all are important entities to fund. Our seniors are some of our most vulnerable people, and we're aging, and so we need to support that center to the fullest extent. My question deals with the $4.2 million deficit. And if my memory was correct from our last meeting, closing the utility tax loophole will raise an estimated $3.5 million annually, and this will affect just 450 of approximately 35,000 to 40,000 accounts. So this affects about 1% of the entities. And then if the city were to allow cannabis sales, that's been projected to be $560,000. And so if you've got a deficit of $4.2 million, you have about $4.1 million in revenue that is readily available.
I'm just going to say, I understand you say that every meeting, but you're so against video gaming. If we took out $2.5 million in video gaming from our budget, where would we be? So it's all how we all seven feel here, and I got to counter that because I hear that cannabis argument all the time. It's not that much money. It's not a game changer.
Mr. Horn?
I have asked the city staff a large number of times to please provide data that would indicate that the societal costs are less than the financial gain that we get. If I had that information, I could make a better decision about video gambling. But the point I'm trying to make is we're talking about a $4.2 million deficit. And that deficit can be closed with two sources of revenue that impact, one of them impacts 1% of the entities. And I'll just also say this city council removed the bag service for garbage collection. In doing so, we increased the cost of garbage service by about $300 a year, which is the same price, same amount that some entities are going to experience with the utility tax increase.
Quick question. Did you get new data on the marijuana sales? Because everything that we have seen projected would be about, this is before Harristown had marijuana, approximately $350,000 a year. With Harristown getting about $200,000, and I guess Forsyth has been told they were going to get $500,000, but the math doesn't work. Because if one entity is already getting $200,000 out of the proposed $350,000 for the entire county, the math ain't mathin'. So.
Well, I would argue, though, that Forsyth has some significant attractors that certainly could drive more sales to that area.
Okie doke. You want to go on, with Mr. Kinza?
I'm just going to open it up for the 10 director presentations. Deputy City Manager Kinzeth is going to cover the executive portion. It can be found on page 21.
If I may, Tim, I'd like to just go back to revenue for one second and remind that we still have the grocery tax. So the grocery tax is included in the 2025 budget, but the City Council will have a decision to make before the 2026 budget.
You said it is included?
It is.
Okay.
But that is a $2.1 or $2.3 million potential loss in revenue for the City of Decatur. As Tim said, on page 21 is the legislative and executive budget. These budgets are largely unchanged from previous years, with minor adjustments up and down. For a couple of years there, we were paying. We were paying for the National League of Cities. That's where the membership fees fell off. But this covers mayor, city council, sister city program, things like that. On page 23. On page 24 is the executive department, covers the city manager's office, the clerk, communications. It does include the additional staff member that Tim referenced, and then it also does include some additional lobbying services for the city. We've had a lot of success with the couple of lobbyists that we use currently for both water and sewer projects, as well as for transportation issues. And so that's an addition this year as well. If I can go on to page 48, this is the Civic Center operating expenses. This is the expenses that we pay to basically operate this facility for all of the departments on page 48. In the past, we had budgeted for some additional security upgrades to the Civic Center. We have done some of those things, but we've largely paused on which additional steps to take. And so that's where you see a reduction there from 190,000 down to 75. What we've done as a result of it is that we've increased security in physical manpower to kind of offset some of that. You'll also see that we're lowering the electricity, and that's in large part due to the solar panels that are now installed in the Civic Center parking lot. And then if I can keep moving here, I'm going to page 104, just to cover the TIFs briefly. We currently have 7 TIF districts. We are closing these, and that's with the additional new TIF that the City Council created back in May of this year. And so by the end of 2024, we will close the Old Town TIF. The Old Town TIF is the second TIF district in the city of Decatur. I believe it was in 2022. We closed the first TIF, which was the Airport Plaza TIF, which was the south end of Mount Zion Road. So we currently have 7. We'll soon be at 6 before the end of the year. But then the other highlight to look forward to during the calendar year of FY25 is we anticipate closing the Wabash Crossing TIF probably a year or two early, as soon as we finish some remaining work that the council approved at last Monday night's council meeting. But otherwise, a lot of those TIFs are money in, money out, meaning that there's increment generated, and either it's being paid to a private developer that caused that development and is generating the increment, or it's being set aside and we do public infrastructure projects like we brought to the City Council at the last meeting last Monday night. And then the new central TIF, which is the latest TIF that was created earlier this year, is on page 111. Since that is the first year, we are largely basing that on really estimates based on what we think we can generate in that first year, and then ultimately how we've allocated it out for some of those expenses, largely following the other large area TIFs, such as Old Town TIF and the Wabash TIF. Last thing I will add, that when we close the Old Town TIF by the year end, we believe that will have generated $30 million in increased value during the life of that TIF. So certainly a successful TIF by that standard.
Just clarifying back to the grocery tax for a minute, because it doesn't expire until the end of 2025. So we are counting it as expected revenue, but we would, even though if the council takes action, it would be regarding fiscal year 26.
Correct. It's just a reminder that we will have to do something on it during the calendar year of 25 to address 26's problem.
But it doesn't really change the budget numbers. Councilwoman?
Just a statement, there used to be a grid in the budget book that talked about when TIF, or explained when, it provided a date for when the TIF expired. I found that helpful. It would be nice to have back. Thank you.
Chuck?
Back to page 24, lobbying services, there's a line item for $100,000 that looks new, so could you explain that, or?
The lobbying services in the executive department.
All right, here I was jotting notes, and then I thought I probably don't need to jot notes. I've probably got Anthony and Ruby doing that. So the lobbying services. And this started, we have Dr. Ann Snyder. She's done an amazing job for us. Hired her when I was here before. And what she's done with the asphalt, concrete, transportation type of efforts is amazing. This lobbying service is plugged into the budget because there is so much money available out in D.C. That I feel like we are missing out on other opportunities, even though we're doing very well on the transportation type of grants. So that's what that is.
And also keep in mind, we split the cost of Ann Schneider with the county so that we are on the same page.
I guess my question is, did we not use her for the last 2 years? Or?
No, we have. She's brought in, what, $130 million?
No, but I'm just saying there was no line item here. That's what made me question it. There was nothing in 2023, so where did we pay her from?
It was budgeted in the
The answer to that from Mr. Cooling was it was budgeted in the Public Works Department. But yeah, I agree, the line item in this we have not seen before.
We also have one additional lobbyist that's paid for out of water and sewer as well, depending on the work that she works on. Lisa Bonnet is her name.
So this line item is for additional lobbyists, as the manager was talking about, not the
Yes,
ones that we
ma'am.
were, yeah. Got a little lost too. Other questions or comments from council? Dr. Horn?
Mr. Kenseth, page 105, Old Town TIF Fund, will it have a positive revenue balance at the end of that date? And will that end of its expiration date, and will that money be transferred to the general fund?
No, the money will all be spent prior to the end of the year. We will make one final bond payment that basically comes due in December, and that will essentially eat up the remaining cash balance that is there. And then moving forward, those bond payments do continue into 26 and 27 and beyond, and those will be payments that will ultimately have to be absorbed by the general fund in the outlying years.
Pat, did you have your hand up? Oh. Okay, we're good.
All right, next up, Mayor and Council, is Ruby James, and she's going to walk through the Finance Department. You're not?
She already did?
All right, I wanted to make sure. And then French Wilson, HR Director. And then Anthony, do me a favor, find a spot next to Ruby, just in case we need you. Okay, French, you're up.
Good evening. My budget is on page 30. The Human Resources Department continues to provide leadership and direction to support all city departments. We are definitely a compliance department. We assure that when we have recruitment, compensation, performance appraisals, we administer the FMLA program, we administer, so anything that is federal or state that deals with compliance or laws that deal with employees and employees in the organization falls within our department. We have approximately four staff members in our department to make sure that that happens. My ask, if you look at the head count, is that we receive one additional person and an electronic filing device. Our comparables, Springfield, Champaign, Bloomington, all similar size, have a department between 8 and 10 HR people to run their city operation. So even though we're still falling below, we're happy to have the one, because right now we're very busy and we're trying to keep things going because we don't make widgets, so we can't increase the money that comes in by making widgets or product. But what we can do is ensure that we are in compliance with the federal, state, and laws. Therefore, we don't have to pay out money when we do something that goes against those rules. So that's where we are, and pretty much that's it for me.
Questions for Ms. French? Don't see any.
Quick comment related to HR, Mayor. Stepping back into this position post-COVID now for, a year going on 2 years. This also, I talk about an increase in salaries. I talk about being an employer of choice. We're also very much, in a season of more. And what I mean by that is my expectation of the different departments. So if we get to a point with salaries that we're going to be able to recruit stronger, better, farther, and then these processes, it's going to add additional work for the HR department. And I think it's a modest ask, for the HR manager position, but just wanted to add that to her presentation.
Lisa?
Thank you, Mayor. I don't know whether this goes towards French or to the city manager, but both Councilman Culp and I got a text over the weekend about a public works individual and who's doing an outstanding job. His customer service skills went above and beyond. And so I know that we forwarded that information to the city manager. I don't know if there is something internal that can be done, but I think it's important if we're talking about being an employer of choice, that our employees are recognized when our citizens have something wonderful to say about them.
Mr. Kuehl?
I'd just like to say this why French is up here, because it's not personal against any staff member here. I guess what I'm struggling with is you mentioned we're going to have a $4 million deficit, and you've asked us to not only increase our current employees' pay, but you're asking us to increase the number of employees, and our city the population is flat or maybe growing a little, maybe growing a little less, and that's where I struggle with this whole process overall. And I guess I just need to be convinced, and I'm listening, but that's where I'm struggling internally is what I just said, basically.
Let the manager respond.
No, I'm going to say I fully understand, so here I'm sitting in this seat again. It's not a complete do-over, where in 2015 I stepped into 5 days operating cash is all that we had as a community, and had to make some, decisions, council did, to put us on the right track. And, so I know what I'm asking for, but I also feel that it's my job to advocate for the needs of the organization. Hopefully I can convey what those needs are, and ultimately it's council's decision. I'm definitely not going to box this council in a corner, where you only have one decision. That's not my role, but feel at least at this beginning point of presenting FY25 that, that this is what I want to share at this point. Where we land and what's adopted, that's about a month and a half out.
I just want to follow, because with French up here, all the employees need to be valued, okay? I'm not trying to devalue anyone here. It's economics is all it is in my mind. And so let's say you did get the gas tax approved. Okay, so now you're bringing another $3 million, and all of a sudden you're growing the government. You're growing our staff and everything. And so it's just an overall struggle in my mind what the best direction is. And so I'm listening, and I'm going to listen to all my council members, but that's just kind of where I'm at.
Lisa?
Thank you, Mayor. I think for me, and it's just a comment, what really stings is the overspending of $3.5 million. And so in my mind, in 2024, at the beginning of this year, we were constantly told, oh boy, 2025 is going to be really tough. Well, I don't know any council person here who has the funds all laid out on a desk at home, and every time we approve an expenditure, go home and deduct it from the fund so that we have a general idea where we are in every fund. What we see that comes to us is this was approved in the budget, and so that's what we look for. And so in my mind, it's like, how did this, and we're ultimately responsible, how did we approve $3.5 million over budgeted items? And then it also, for me, in my mind, begs another question, in that I know that an approval of $25,000 or greater, I think, is the state requirement, has to be brought before the governing body for approval. To overspend $3.5 million is a lot of 24,999s. And so I just want to make that statement that it's difficult to begin a budget conversation from the bottom of a hole.
David?
Well, since we're talking about number of employees, I'll just mention that one of the things I recall City Manager Gleason saying is that we need to offer white glove service. We need to provide concierge level service, and I agree with that. And I would say that all of the departments, we can all improve and do better, and that's going to happen with more employees. It's not going to happen by reducing the number of employees and expecting them to do more. My question to City Manager Gleason is, can you remind the council just in general about what the population is of your former city, Bloomington, and approximately how many employees you had?
It's not necessarily an apples-to-apples comparison. City of Bloomington's 80,000, maybe 82,000 now. 750 employees full-time, and then with the part-time seasonal, we were at about 1,100. But the difference there is I had solid waste as an internal department, part of Public Works. That's garbage pickup. And then also the Park District, and the entertainment venue belongs to the city, which it's separate here. So that's a part of it.
Pat?
I don't disagree with what everybody's saying. Again, Ms. James pointed out in their commentary that they budgeted on a very conservative. I mean, it could get worse, it could get better. But again, they said 7 of those new employees are going to be police officers. We know our crime. We open up the paper, we listen to the radio, what's going on. We all gripe about this speeding, and the police department's doing a great job stopping people more than they have in the past. That saves lives and costs for everybody. So, I mean, that's 7 employees we really need. Okay. I mean, hopefully we can get them because everybody else other police departments are trying to recruit too. So, but with bringing the beginning wage up. But again, sometimes by adding, additional one here, you might be more efficient. More it gets done to a certain extent. And as Mr. Horn said, customers, just like in retail, our customers out there, get a little PO'd when they get an answering machine, leave a message, and I don't like it. So we'll watch it. And one of the good thing is the city manager knows if we have to cut, we won't replace somebody that leaves. So that's an out for the city manager.
I think we're good.
Thank you, French.
Thank you.
Next up is Corporation Counsel Wendy Morthland, and go ahead and stay right where you're at, Wendy, and walk through your department.
I have 2 pages, 41 and 42. One of the smallest budgets, nothing's changing essentially from last year. We have very little control over what we do. It's, what's going on externally affects our work, but I'm here for any questions.
Dr. Horn?
Corporation Counsel Morthland, as you know, City of Decatur has selected an environmental attorney, and in addition, there might be litigation association with the demolition of the YWCA building. I know some of that may be handled in-house. Do you feel that there is enough funding to deal with the litigation that we have a sense may be coming forward in 2025?
I do.
Anybody else? Okay, that was fast.
One thing I'll add, Jim, come on up, but one thing I'll add with the legal department is also the collective bargaining agreements. That's something that I set at the table, and one of Wendy's team sets. See no reason to outsource that unless there is a reason. And I think over the course of the 3 collective bargaining agreements, that would be a savings of about $250,000, $300,000, what we spent in the past. So that's a savings. Jim, you've got IT.
Hello, City Council. I'm happy to be before you today to share my budget. As you've noticed, and I'm starting on page 31, which is my program description. I do a large effort to try to write my program description, so it's pretty thorough. But if you've got questions about that, I'll go that. But I want to highlight a couple of things that I really need to speak to that may go beyond the program description. Number one is I have reduced the budget in a lot of areas, and I have reduced it year over year to prior year as far as budget is concerned. However, the software budget continues to climb, and you need an explanation. I put one in there, but I'm going to go a little deeper. So there's a couple of issues that we've got. I'll be talking briefly about the PEG fund too, which is the Program Education Channel Fund. And that fund is dwindling because there's more and more people streaming and a lot less people doing cable services, and it reduces the revenue dollars we get from that. So we were funding website development / maintenance / everything you need to run a good website. And I had to move that to software and get it out of PEG. So that's part of the reason for the increase. Another reason for the increase is we are making a concerted effort to get off of old legacy systems. To get off of a system, you got to invest in either expanding a system you have or standing up a new one. So there's a little bit of increase in there. It's attributed to that. So system to system, you pay for it somewhere. So that budget obviously is the only one that's got a positive number on it outside of employee services. But I think I've done a pretty good job trying to keep it tailed as much as possible. I'll entertain any questions on that before I move on to fiber and PEG.
Questions? Go ahead.
So the fiber fund starts on page 142. Things have gone pretty well in the fiber fund, but there's a couple of things that I need to kind of expand on. Last year, we were standing up here talking about the glorious opportunity we had with Sci-Fi Networks in order to expand into neighborhoods and actually make fiber available to households. That agreement fell right through the floor. So when I got that news a couple of months ago, I have started communications with other companies that do such like services. One, you've seen commercials running on Channel 17, Connexus. Connexus is actually talking to us right now about building a network in the northwest region of Decatur. They've actually got some right-of-way permits in with us, and we're working through that with them now. So that is something, there's 3 providers that we're talking to, Connexus and also I3. Connexus is Metro out of Sullivan, Illinois, and I3 is out of Peoria, Illinois. It's likely that we'll probably have some kind of hybrid between the 2 companies. I'm not sure yet, but Connexus is the one that beat everybody else kind of to the punch, and that's who we've really started talking. And I know Dr. Horn, you were really concerned about that earlier in the year, so that's what happened with Sci-Fi, and this is what we're trying to do to remedy that and get the project back on the rails. Yes.
Mr. Edwards, that's exciting to hear that there's some other possibilities, but you mentioned Connexus and the northwest corridor of the northwest corner of Decatur. What about the urban core?
Yeah, the urban core is important, but the reason Connexus is starting there is because that's where they've got most of their facilities built already. So that's the only reason they're starting there. So I am talking to I3 and another provider. It's actually named Intrepid. I don't believe Intrepid will probably be able to meet the requirements we need, but I3 very well could. They have interest in sharing our network. It's already in the ground. I've sent them plans to what it looks like, and it could be that we could start in the urban core with that provider. And that's the reason I mentioned we may have multiple providers in town. Good question.
I think you're good.
Anything else on fiber? Okay, the only other budget I've got responsibility for is PEG. And I think I've already mentioned what's happening to PEG. It kind of gives credence to maybe having us look at it, some kind of streaming taxing or something of that nature, because that's where it's all going. Everybody's finding a way to not have to pay for content through a content provider and instead streaming it over the internet. So that fund will continue to dwindle. It's been dwindling about 10% a year. So it's balanced, and we're able to maintain the equipment in this room and in the equipment room with the funding we're currently getting. So it's not in trouble yet because I moved the website development stuff away from there. I'll entertain any questions on PEG. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim.
Wait,
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
okay. I remember your presentation last year. You lie awake a lot at nights because of everything that's going on.
I still do.
Okay, well, the only time I do that is if I have a pizza late at night, but you have major problems, because we don't want ransom. You know, we've had, our local hospital was nailed, and other cities and that, so and I think you said the cost of a lot of these new programs has gone up about 30%?
Yep.
Okay, so we want to make sure that you're getting what you need to pay for it, because if we get, a $20 million, $30 million ransom, like a lot of these throughout the country, different cities and entities, that's a lot of money.
Yeah, so as I reported in the report, we are throwing additional dollars even this year towards cybersecurity. And cybersecurity tools aren't cheap, but I think we're buying the right tools for the size of government we have that are protecting us well at this point. And I hesitate to even say stuff like this, but I feel good about it. Am I going to lose sleep? Of course I am. It's one of my job roles to ensure that our data integrity is maintained. And we can't maintain it if we don't at least make strong attempts to wean it. And the number one problem with cybersecurity is, quite frankly, our own people and their behavior. So we're getting ready to put out an education program that you'll be proudly a part of.
Well, you don't look good with bags underneath your eyes, so get some sleep.
Thank you.
Mr. Manager.
Thank you very much. Lacey LZ is our Director of Transportation Services, and the floor is yours.
Good evening. So fiscal year 25, we will be focusing heavily on operations. So there is an increase in our operation funding in preparation for the route study, which I will be excited to bring to you guys later on this year with route reorganization recommendations. One of the big highlights of that we've talked a lot about this past year has been microtransit, and we were successful in getting a community project funding microtransit grant out of Senator Durbin's office out of the THUD appropriations. So because of that, we can use that money towards match for our Illinois Department of Transportation grant. So just a reminder that all operations from the Transportation Department are completely grant funded through a combination of the majority of IDOT and then also the FTA. So the $2.5 million that we got for the CPF will go towards our match for that, allowing us to leverage more of our IDOT funding for operations. So some of the things that we have looked at in the route study and that we've talked about is increasing our hours of operation. So there is a lot of shift work. I think as we heard earlier in the year, 12 out of 15 of our major employers here in Decatur are shift employers. And so with transit operations ending at around 7 at night, a lot of our routes are half-hour and hour-long routes. People cannot get to or from work. So that'll be some exciting recommendations that we have out of that. I'd also like to highlight, because of that, we're asking for 2 additional staff members that will be completely eligible for grant funding, an additional mechanic and an additional transit utility worker. So they help fuel and clean the buses at night. Microtransit will be additional fleet. So we will have additional operations to take care of in the maintenance department. And then we are still working on the capital. We still have a large influx of capital dollars as we have been working with the FTA to execute the very lengthy environmental review process for our capital construction. We'll also be seeking out additional capital funds to continue to fund the improvements at the transit campus. And then I would just like to highlight that we still do have some planning grants that we will be focusing on next year. The high-speed feasibility study will commence next year, and so will the Safe Streets and Routes for All Action Plan. So, any questions?
Councilman Horn?
Will 2025 be the year that the city of Decatur has a public EV charging station?
We hope so. So we were awarded the Illinois EPA CEJA grant to fund the first 4 public charging stations in Decatur. And so we will be working on getting those executed it started now, but they probably will not manifest until fiscal year 2025.
And then, if my recollection is correct, we moved the mechanics back from, I believe the company is MV, to City of Decatur employees because we argued that the mechanics would have a greater stake in maintaining the vehicles that we own. Is there any efficiencies, and this may be to City Manager Gleason, is there any efficiencies in the budget to moving the drivers who certainly would have a stake in making sure that their buses are driven well and maintained well?
So that is something that City Manager Gleason and myself have started to discuss. Our current operations contract with MV Transportation extends through 2026. So in fiscal year 2025, we need to do a study and see if that is a feasible option to bring them in-house, or if we would need to prepare an additional request for proposals to contract that out. Yes.
Could you explain the campus master plan for 1.2 million, please? That was
Yes.
on page 135.
The campus master plan is, we have been working on the conceptual campus master plan when we were awarded the low no emissions grant to help with the fleet transition to battery electric. And we put additional dollars in there, planning dollars, to execute that further in this next year.
And the key word was there was a grant for that, is that correct?
Correct.
Seeing no further questions, Mr. Manager?
Thank you very much. All right, next up, Deputy Chief is Fire. Deputy Chief Neil Helder is going to step in for Chief Abbott, who is out. Chief?
Good evening, Council. Just to introduce myself, I am Neil Elder, newly promoted Deputy Chief, and Chief Abbott is unavailable, throwing me figuratively into the fire immediately upon my promotion. A couple of things that if you look at, see, page 72 is where our program description begins. We're looking for a couple of positions. One is a position we've had previously, they're bringing back in fire prevention for an inspector. We have 2 right now. We're working on getting them educated and up to speed, but they are currently investigating fires, still having to split some of that responsibility with the State Fire Marshal's Office investigators. Having that 3rd would bring us back for not only fire prevention activities, all the inspections, just to effectively distribute that workload that's been placed on 2. The other new position that we are proposing would be a training chief position. This role would oversee our comprehensive training program, ensuring that all firefighters meet the state of Illinois requirements for maintaining firefighter, EMT, fire investigator, and special operations certifications. In the last year, State Fire Marshal's Office mandated training hours to maintain those certifications. Where previously they had recommendations, now will be audited. All your training hours have to be documented and submitted to the state, where previously they didn't have that check. We did it, they just didn't do it. Not only for that, for IDOL and for our ISO rating. These hours, I'll look this up for me today. By the end of 2025, we have 568 individual recertifications that we have to submit to the state. Each firefighter or company officer will need to complete between 300 and 500 hours annually. And the reason that differentiates is because of the training. We have different levels of training, from special operations, which are ropes and trench rescue and hazardous materials. And so that is included in that. So the training chief will not only provide consistency and quality, but will also handle all that documentation and the reimbursement submissions for these training hours and classes. Aside from those positions, really the rest of the budget remains the same. We have some replacement items, some updates in our some of our equipment that's outdated, but it's relatively unchanged. The big one that's in there under personal protective equipment would be bunker gear. The price has gone up significantly in the last few years, and we just need to get our people in the protective gear they need to be in. Again, I apologize for walking in late, but we were at ADM again for another event.
All right, does council have any questions for the deputy chief?
Speaking of ADM, in both 2021 and 2022, there were CO2 leaks surface leaks at the carbon sequestration facility in Decatur. Does the fire department have the equipment that it needs to address a CO2 leak? I know it's hard to estimate what that amount of CO2 would be, but do we have the equipment? Do we have the apparatus?
So we would be only alerted if there were some kind of a catastrophic or emergency events. If it happens over time and there's not any environmental or danger to the citizens immediately, they're not going to call us. We do, if there was a significant leak, we've got monitors that could potentially detect CO2 if it is that type of event.
I think where I'm coming from is, if there's a CO2 leak, I assume that you have the masks that you need, right?
We do.
You've got
we
oxygen
do.
masks.
Yeah, we have
right.
a full hazmat team with a full complement of PPE.
Right. And would you have those masks available for the people if there were, for example, civilians that were impacted?
We would not. We protect ourselves and we evacuate the citizens.
Councilman Culp?
Neil, this third fire inspector you're requesting, is this going to get us back in the schools for fire education, or are we back in there already?
This year, we did not get back in the schools. They visited the firehouse. We just got those 2 new inspectors, but that is just a meeting with Chief Abbott, our staff meeting. That's where we're going with that 3rd inspector, to get into the schools, to reach out to as many students and children as possible.
And with that third person, that would also get us away from the state fire marshal, or waiting for them for their follow-ups?
Yes, that's correct. So we wouldn't have to leave. Right now, we have to leave an apparatus on scene for potentially 2 hours. If our local one that lives in Taylorville is gone, the next closest response is generally Fisher, Illinois, and then by the time he gets here, it's an hour and a half, 2 hours.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
I had a quickie, if you don't mind. Chief, if you would, comment to, and it might not be an FY25 item, but comment to some of the vehicle replacement. Just let council know, just sort of the proactive approach, forecasting with the challenges of even getting the larger equipment.
Definitely. So our fleet is hurting a little bit right now. Our reserve apparatus is aging. Our front line is starting to age. We've ordered 3 over a year ago, and they won't be in until hopefully the end of 2025 is the projected dates. And that's with all apparatus moving forward. We're going to need a new truck at some point in the future, and it's going to be 2 years before we have to order it and wait for 2 years. So hopefully our apparatus holds up.
Councilman Kuehl?
I'm just going to ask you to state or restate the deficiencies in the department, since you only have 2 fire inspectors, because we went from 3 down to 0, then we negotiated 2, Now we're asking to add another one. I heard Councilman Culp say something about attending into the schools, but what's the life like of the other two inspectors right now? What hardships are they facing?
They're just very busy all the time. We don't have the fire prevention program to reach out to our citizens. We've still got we've still got a lot of fires, and we just need those replacements. They also did fire hydrants pre-plans to get into these buildings, to get into ADM, to see the hazards that we face before we go in.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Councilman Horn?
Speaking of fires, I don't have the exact numbers in front of me, but is it correct that Decatur has one of the highest number of fires of any central Illinois city?
It is correct, especially when you compare the fires to the number of to our staffing. Fires per firefighter that we have on duty.
All right, seeing no further questions, thank you, Deputy Chief. Mr. Manager?
Thank you. Thanks, Chief.
Thank you.
All right, Chief Brandell, Decatur Police Department.
Okay, first off, that was dirty of Abbott to do that to you, so that's not cool. Second off, please, and I'll tell you why, give him whatever money he needs. So for our budget, you know, I've made this statement before, the pillars that we use to kind of guide us through progress and success, and that's recruiting, retention, training, technology and equipment, and community relations, and that remains the same. And if you look at some of the increases within our budget, one of the huge ones is through computer software and technology. The police department has, I believe, over half of the technology in the city housed at our department. And that's not going to get any better in the future. You know, some of the costs that we have built in, you know, we moved the flock into it, but we have computer upgrades that we need to have done inside the building, within our cars. There's other technology out there, the legacy systems that he's talked about, we've had to replace. We don't have an option to not have a use of force database or a training database or an IA database. We have to have those things, and those unfortunately cost a significant amount of money. We've also had an increase in overtime. That's been one of the battles I've had the last couple of years to try to set our overtime right. And that's really because of the staffing issues that we've dealt with in the last 4 or 5 years. And they continue, and I anticipate that to continue into 2025. We currently sit with 9 vacancies and 13 in training. So you think about, you know, 22 non-deployable positions. And that's after, as Mr. Gleason had mentioned, we had the height at my career, we would average, or the staffing was right around 163, 164, and I believe the height with an overhire was 168. So then we got pulled down to 148, and now we're 20-some down from that. So you talk about, you know, 40 fewer police officers, that's more than an entire shift. So what we've had to do in the past 4 years, at least, as Mr. Gleason mentioned, was pretty much reorganize the entire department. The 12-hour patrol shift, the Bureau is getting ready, our Detective Division is getting ready to go through a reorganization. And the whole purpose behind that is as the direction I've given my staff is, the department was looking exactly like it did 28 years ago when I started, and it's a very different world, and we need to reorganize and make the department fit the needs of the city and the capabilities that we have. And that's where we move forward. The staffing that he mentioned, like I said, we're going from 148 or 147, depending on who you talk to, up to 154. Now, some of that are positions that we've already had to redivert, right? So we talked about the SRO, the additional SRO that was approved. I had to take that out of the patrol division. So that's kind of to fill that gap. We needed a recruiting officer. That was one of the things I actually held off on, in my opinion, too long, looking back on it. Because we've had good benefit from actually having a dedicated recruiting officer. Again, that came out of Patrol Division, so I need to fill that. The DUI officer that we had that focused on our DUI enforcement within the city, that was grant funded, so now that would go away, so this fills that. He mentioned a couple supervisors that we need, especially on our back shifts. Our back shift right now, the most senior officer on our back shift has about 3 years on. 3. That's pretty crazy if you think about it. And then the supervisors on those back shift, same thing, a couple years at best. And many of them are brand new supervisors. So we need to have additional supervisors to manage young officers that are going out there to try to do a really good job. But this is a crazy world, and they need to have some senior leadership to help them, because that informal leadership is no longer there on those back shifts. When you got day shift guys that have 2.5 years on, that's nuts. When previously we were talking 12 years to get to day shift. So that's the whole thing on the staffing part of it. And as I mentioned, the technology is there, and the training mandates, that also causes gaps in our staffing as well, because we have to have certain amounts of training, and we like to exceed that by a lot. I would say most of our officers have probably 10 times the amount of required training that the state mandates. But when you have to pull people off the street to do that training, then we got to fill those gaps. Part of the need for that overtime as well. So with that, I'll pause and take questions.
Questions from council? Councilman Horn?
So the police department is requesting 7 positions, and if I recall correctly, one's going to be a school resource officer, and Decatur Public Schools already pays for some of that.
75%.
One is a recruiting officer, one is a DUI officer, and then 2 are supervisors on the back shift. For the supervisors on the back shift, is there going to be some required number of years of experience so that we're not going from, let's say, 3 years to 4 years?
Yeah, you have to have 8 years on to become a supervisor. So you can't even test until you have that much seniority.
And will the other 2 be patrol officers, detectives, whatever?
So right now we're debating on that. In the reorganization of our investigations division, one of the things that we're likely going to create, I wouldn't say likely, we are, is a tech services, a tech unit essentially, with all of the computer analysis, cell phone analysis, cell phone mapping, cell phone data extractions, all of that sort of stuff, internet crimes against children, all that stuff we've been slacking on, to be quite frank. And so it's just not something that I want to see our department slack on. So we're going to build that unit. And that, again, that's a representation of where we stand in time today. And then we're also, there's a couple other options that we're looking at for that last position. I kind of want to keep that a little bit quiet because I don't want to create rumors when it's unnecessary.
Councilman Kuehl?
So the top number is 154, if I heard correctly.
That's correct, yes.
And so every year we've had vacancies and shortages. I mean, realistically, are we going to hit 154? Because we have all these staff vacancies, which save us money over time. And so I'm just trying to figure out, is there going to be that cushion again? Or are we going to hit 154? Or what do you think?
So if we do, I'm going to come back here and give you a big kiss. So
that's okay.
I can't answer that question. I wish I could. It really, the market, kind of drives this. If I'm going to be blunt and honest, I would be surprised if we did hit that. But at least it gets us in that right direction. And then even if, because what I would hate to have is not have those positions, and then we do have the ability to hire. Because we were kind of getting there, and we had a little bit of a setback here this last half of the year, but I see progress in the ability to recruit and hire. And so I think by putting it into the 25 budget, even if we underfund it a bit or we end up having some vacancies, we'll be good. I think this year I'm looking at probably $1 million that's going to be given back just in salaries alone.
Any other questions?
I do have one more comment. All of our vehicles are now going to be hybrid, so you don't have to ask me about it anymore.
Thank you, Chief. Mr. Manager?
Thank you, and thank you, Chief. We're down to the last 2. Public Works Director Matt Newell. Matt, the floor is yours.
Mayor, members of council. Public Works budget is scattered all over the book, so it's like a treasure hunt when you try to find where everything is. We have 4 divisions in the Public Works Department. We have engineering, which is our manager there is Paul Caswell, the city engineer. He has 12 years of experience with the city. He's been with the city 12 years. He's been as a city engineer for 6. Municipal Services Center is the next general fund budgeted division in the Public Works Department. It's under Byron Bowman. Byron has been with us 35 years, I believe. Came from Tech One all the way up to the division manager of municipal services. Our next 2 divisions are under the Water Fund, which is water production, which is under Robert Weil. Robert's been with us for 2 years, I believe, and he's currently in the middle of his first year as the manager. He took over from Keith Alexander, who was with the city for about 34 years. And then we have Water Services, which is maintains the water system for the city, all of the distribution system and the water metering, water services. That's all under Randy. Randy has been with the city for 27 years, and this is his 19th year as the Water Services Manager. So we have a lot of experience with the division staff of the Public Works Department. So the first 2 divisions, engineering and municipal services, those begin on page 78 in your book. Those are general funded positions. I've outlined them pretty well, I thought, in the narrative. If there are questions, certainly the division managers are here. Paul Caswell has an anniversary. Thought that was a little more important than this. Well, I'll let him off.
Do council members have questions on the first part of Mr. Newell's presentation? I don't know if this is the appropriate time, but we want to give a large shout out to Carl Ziemer, who went above and beyond with one of our citizens this last week. So if you could pass that along, that would be great.
I will do that. Have done that already, yes. Thank you.
I think you're getting off easy, no questions.
All right. We have then progressing through the budget book. There is the Storm Fund on page 146. Then there is the Sanitary Sewer Fund on page 152. These are then the capital funds we're getting into. So these are funded generally by fees from the citizens for stormwater, sanitary sewer. Then we get water and motor fuel tax. Those funds are, other than water, which manages a big chunk of the city staff and operations. The others generally storm, sanitary, and motor fuel tax funds generally fund capital improvements, or where those funds are dedicated towards, which all generally come back to the City Council for discussion and approval when we put those together.
Any questions?
So we do have then the Water Fund, which is water production under Robert Weil, and water services under Randy Miller. That's on page 166, begins there. You got to turn fast because my numbers are counting down.
Councilman Horn.
Couple of questions regarding water operations. City Manager Gleason referred to this earlier about perhaps needing more funding for water projects. And it's been a couple of years, so my memory's a little hazy. But didn't we hire CDM Smith to do a projection of costs, and then my memory is we were told we're going to need a water bond, and once we get a water bond, that plus cost of living increases will result in us paying for our water projects. And my impression is that has changed? Because we do have the water bond, and we are giving cost of living increases, if you will, inflationary increases. So are we going to need to revisit the CDM Smith report? Are the financial projections obsolete?
Financial projections are off. I mean, we had the CDM Smith and we had COVID, which hit, which shot everything through the roof in all of our activities. I think citywide, but in particular, as far as I was concerned, in our capital funding, it did hit us pretty hard. So we are not able to keep up with the CDM Smith plan as it was proposed with the current revenue stream of the water fund.
And are we just millions short, low tens of millions short, high tens of millions short, ballpark?
We are millions short. I would not say we're tens of millions short. It kind of depends on how fast you want to go with some of these. CDM Smith did not tell us you got to do this quickly. They did outline the progression. They did put a timeline on some of it, which we've tried to adhere to initially. But we do try to keep a 5-year capital program, which is included in the budget book for councils for your reading enjoyment. But we keep that fund within, we keep that 5-year plan within our available funding.
And then this is just a more general question. As you may know, ADM Company had a subsurface leak at its CO2 sequestration facility in 2022. Does the city plan for such subsurface leaks if in fact they occurred in Lake Decatur? I mean, and how would you plan for that? And do you need any funding to respond to such a leak?
Right now, I'm not sure what our options would be if that did occur. I mean, we do have some protocols in place to protect the city's water supply and isolate the water treatment plant if we needed to. But I've not understood the CO2 leak to be that kind of a hazard to us. It would dissipate, to where it would dissipate, I guess, but it would not do a lasting harm to our water supply, I believe.
Yeah, I have no sense. I wouldn't even be able to speculate whether it's 8,000 metric tons or 80,000 metric tons. It's very difficult to predict that. Okay.
Councilman Kuehl?
I just have a general question now, looking back with the ARP funds that we use for sewer projects and so on. Are you comfortable where we are now versus where we would have been? Are we ahead of the game? Are we holding our own? Where are we, generally speaking, with our sewers? And
well, the sewer fund, if you get the opportunity to read that little treatise we included in the budget, there are concerns. This year we are beginning to overspend our revenues in the sanitary sewer fund. So we have coming up 3 big capital projects. One is the Brush College pump station out on Brush College for economic development in that section of the city. We do have I&I work planned for the U.S. EPA consent decree that we've entered into for the Florian Basin up in the Florian area and in the Lost Bridge North area. And we do have the need to rehabilitate the Broadway sewer through Jasper Street on down through the downtown area. We cannot fund all 3 of those projects with the current revenue stream that we have. So we will be proposing some options to the City Council. It would be generally like a 5% increase. Now we get a 2.5 every year. We would be bumping that to a 5 for the next 3 or 4 years. Would allow us to do those 3 major projects, or at this point in time, barring that changed, we would drop the I&I work for the US EPA, since they're not all over us right now, and we do have these other major projects that need to be funded.
Just seems like we got to increase everything everywhere. It seems like sometimes we got so much going on, and that's why we're here, to try to hold the line the best we can.
Councilman Horn?
Mr. Newell, following up on Councilman Kuehl's question, is it fair to say that if we were to tally up the number of unfunded local road projects that we have in the waiting, the number of sewer projects that we have, the number of sanitary or storm sewer projects that we have, and now water projects, that there's tens of millions of dollars worth of projects right now that we don't have a funding source for? Is that fair?
That's fair, but that is something that every city in the United States is dealing with. I mean, our roads will last on the average of 30 years. We are in an aggressive program that will fix every road in the city once every 100 years. So we have these issues that we deal with, and we've been dealing with for the 34 years I've been here.
I think Mr. Newell is accurate. Wouldn't it be nice if we had unlimited funding and so we could keep all of his employees busy every single day, and at the end of 2025 they would sit back and twiddle their thumbs and say, gee whiz, wonder what we're going to do in 2026. That's not real. A city is a working city, and it will always have projects that need to be done. Any other questions?
I was just going to say, it leads me, Matt, looks like you could take on some more things in your department. What do you think?
Oh, please.
That was sarcasm there, yes.
All right, thank you, Mr. Newell. Mr. Manager?
Thank you very much. Thanks, Matt. Just to add to a couple of things that Matt had shared and some of the follow-up questions and comments from council. Want to be very clear, that was part of the horizon comments that I had at the front end. I want council to understand it's not going to be lost, in the third sentence of the third paragraph of a memo that you may not read the entire thing. I want council to be aware, and more so the community, what is in fact on the horizon for us. We have some major infrastructure projects. I'm going to tie this with no promises of success, but trying to position us. So going back to the idea of hiring a lobbyist above and beyond what we already have, this is the type of funding that we would seek. And wherever we can save in a certain area, it possibly is going to allow these very precious local taxpayer dollars to do other work that we have before us at the city. So just wanted to add that. Cordero Patrick is the Community Economic Development Director. Floor is yours.
Thank you, Tim. Good evening, Mayor, members of council. I would like to just provide a brief overview of the Economic Community Development Department recommended FY 2025 budget, and then I yield for questions and answers. The Economic Community Development Department is responsible for the strategic implementation of community revitalization efforts, economic development opportunities and activities, applicable plans, policy codes, and ordinance enforcement that allow for the development of the city. These efforts are accomplished while promoting the general welfare of our citizens, property values, and preserving the city's unique qualities and characteristics through 4 functional divisions: planning and development, which is managed by Jocelyn Stewart; neighborhood revitalization, which is managed by the Assistant Director, Rochelle Dunbar; neighborhood inspections, which is managed by Michael Sneerley; and building inspection, which is managed by David Greenwell. Mike Reed is the acting building official in his absence. But we also partner closely with all of the departments that have come before me this evening. While some of our functions are supported by general fund, many of our operations and programs rely on federal and state grants as well as philanthropic funding sources. The Economic Community Development Department currently has 28 full-time budgeted positions and 2 seasonal temporary positions. The proposed program, staffing, equipment, and resource levels for the Economic Community Development Department in FY25 is comparable to the previous fiscal year except for the following. And I'm going to start with the general fund budget, which starts on page 57. For the Neighborhood Revitalization Division within the department, generally staff salary and benefits for this division have been funded primarily by Community Development Block Grant, Home Investment Partnership, and American Rescue Plan Act funds. Unfortunately, this has limited the type of projects that staff members within the division are able to assist with because their time must be charged, including salary and benefits, to those funding sources. So I have recommended a small percentage of five existing staff members' times to be allocated to general fund to allow for efficiency and project outcomes within this particular division. Small percentage meaning about 5% of their time. Planning and development, there are no significant changes within that division. Neighborhood inspection division, the Economic Community Development Department has implemented several policy changes to help tackle the challenges we are facing with vacant, derelict, abandoned, and rental properties. Those policies include a vacant property registration, a more robust approach to addressing common nuisance violations, and a data-informed system to address high grass and weed abatement violations. As a result, the contractual service budget for this division has been reduced, not increased, reduced. You like to hear that, don't you? Reduced by $100,000 in FY25 compared to FY 2024. Building Inspection Division, I have no significant changes in that division. Economic Development Division, this budget increased from $125,000 to $225,000 for FY 2025, which is a $100,000 increase. The increase is to support our partner, the Community Investment Corporation of Decatur, with implementing the Decatur Home Buyer Initiative that is designed to create more home buyers and homeowners in the city of Decatur. That is the general fund. Any questions before I move to other funds? No? Okay. Funds 16, 17, and 18, which starts on page 112. Those funds are the Community Development Block Grant, Home Investment Funds, as well as what we call community grants. Funds in these budgets remain comparable to this year. The programs and projects under these funds include our Emergency Replacement Program, Facade Improvement Program, Owner-Occupied Rehabilitation Program, Down Payment and Closing Cost Assistance Program, the reuse of Garfield School for independent living apartments in partnership with Byward Development, the renovation of Garfield Park in partnership with Decatur Park District, our roof replacement program, the urban farming project that we're doing in partnership with Old Kings Orchard Community Center, code enforcement, as well as a new grant we received, which is the Brownfields grant under U.S. EPA for environmental assessments. Those are the programs and projects that we are doing with funds out of 16, 17, and 18, which begins on page 112. Any questions?
Councilman Horn.
Mr. Patrick, you mentioned the roof replacement program. Approximately how many roofs are you able to replace each year, and what do you anticipate the actual need to be?
So with the roof replacement program, which is we have had the grant for about a year. With standing up a lot of these state grant funds, it takes a lot of work to get them up and going. You have to put out a list for people to sign up. You have to vet each one of those individuals to make sure they income qualify, et cetera, et cetera. So we have completed 16 roof replacement projects this year. We have submitted 8 to IDA because after we approved them, they have to go to IDA to be approved as well. And sent back to us. And then we have 3 projects which are scheduled for contract signing just this week. To answer your original question, I mean, looking in a direction in Decatur, I mean, that's a house that needs a roof replacement. And so the need is great. I don't think that's unique to Decatur, though. but the need is great as it relates to for our roof replacement program. I think we have about 300-ish people, and we cut it off because we don't have enough funds, even if all 300 were qualified, to replace 300 roofs. So we're working through that list of 300 right now.
So you're working through a list of approximately 300, but you cut off you said 300 is more applicants than we can
Correct.
handle. Okay.
Any other questions? Councilman Kuehl?
I just have a general question. So we have Ann Schneider hired as a consultant. Does she directly affect his department, or does he have enough people going to bat for him for federal dollars, or is that something that we could possibly look at? Because neighborhood revitalization is our #1 area, and are we getting all the dollars that we can get?
Yeah, so we are working with Dr. Ann Schneider on a number of grants, as well as with our transportation director. For example, she just helped her write a reconnecting communities grant, which was we just completed last month, and so she is helping us on a number of state and federal grants. So we use her across all the departments for the most part.
But I will say that there's more opportunity to seek funding to be able to fund community development, neighborhood revitalization, with earmarks being back with our federal delegation. There are, we need to be pursuing this above and beyond what we currently are, and I think that there are those opportunities. We just need to dedicate, have a dedicated person that does this professionally, but then also that support team, because we'll be the ones writing the grants, doing the legwork, collecting the data to put our federal lobbyists in a position to be successful.
Councilman McDaniel?
I think we all understand that anybody can write grants worth their weight in gold, what we can get back. So if we have to pay a good consultant to do that, we'll get double back whatever. So.
Other questions?
My last fund is Fund 84, which is the Community Revitalization Fund, which starts on page 125. Funds in previous years for this budget have been primarily American Rescue Plan, ACT funds, and the Howard G. Buffett Foundation. These funds had specific rules, including investing in the most distressed areas of our community. We have made a lot of improvements in our urban core over the last couple of years. As we move forward with FY 2025, we will begin to expand our efforts to include other neighborhoods within the corporate limits of the city of Decatur, because one of the things that we want to make sure we're doing is making sure that some of the challenges we are having is not bleeding over into some of the outliers neighborhoods in our community. And so we need to make sure that we get inside those communities and push back this way as well with some of the programs we have. I will note that we do have citywide programs right now, programs that are not just designated for the urban core. For example, some of those programs include the Emergency Replacement Program. That program is a citywide program. It is income qualified based, right? And so you may have individuals that may not be in a low miles census tract, but they can still take advantage of funds from that program, for example. Also, our owner-occupied rehab program is another fund, another program that is citywide, so it is not designated by HUD just for low miles census tract. It is an income qualified based program, as well as our down payment assistance and closing costs program is in the roof replacement program. Our programs that are citywide, that we will do a better job to make sure that individuals understand that those programs are not just for low miles census tracts, but they are citywide programs, so that they can apply for those programs if they are in need of those things. The biggest thing I have in Fund 84, which is $1.5 million of the total $2.7 million budget, is demolitions. My time is up, and that's approximately 100 demolitions. That's to do approximately 100 residential. I want to be clear. approximately 100 residential demolitions for next year. How do I do, Tim? Good on time? All right.
Councilman
I
Horn.
practice.
Mr. Patrick, I have a couple of questions for you, but let me preface my perspective. The city of Decatur received $1.25 million from the Howard G. Buffett Foundation in 2020 to fund demolitions, cleanups, and lot acquisitions in the Johns Hill neighborhood. And coinciding with that implementation of grant, there was a 36% reduction in the count of offenses over about a 4-year period, 36% reduction in offenses. And I would also argue an increase in civic engagement in that neighborhood. So where I'm coming from is that neighborhood revitalization reduces crime. So I guess my questions are several. First, let's talk about demolitions. I would argue that derelict buildings are a place where criminal activity can occur, and so we need to remove these derelict buildings. They're simply unsafe. I've heard estimates as high as 250 to 300 demos at the residential level per year to keep pace with the rate of blight. Is that a fair estimate for what the city needs to do to keep pace with the rate of blight?
Yeah, certainly. I would tell you, one of probably the biggest compliments we get is the fact that we are removing blight from neighborhood by way of demolition. People that, I would say never probably had any interactions with city government is now noticing and thanking the city government in Decatur for those type of activities. That's no pat on my back. I got a great team that's doing the work. But my point is that demolition is probably the number one thing that we can do as it relates to visually show the community that community revitalization is happening. Now, demolition is not all in itself community revitalization. It is a piece to the puzzle, right? We're going to do 150 demolitions this year, right? And I would say, and what I told the city manager is, for us to keep to a bare minimum, to keep pace, very bare minimum, we can't do less than 100. We're going to be in trouble if we do that. And so that is was reflected in the budget today. I can probably do 150 to 175 demolitions, to be honest with you, with the capacity that I have. I couldn't do 250 and 300 demolitions per year because we won't have enough contractors to do that. We don't have enough internal capacity to do that.
Councilman McDaniel.
Another way to slow down, and I've pushed this many times, is code enforcement, so we can stop the blight. And yeah, there's some people are going to be upset, but that's going to slow down further where we have to tear down a house if they take care of it. So continue, increase that, because I drive around the community, and a lot of times when I've called city staff about certain houses I see, because I drive around in different neighborhoods, they're already been worked on, so that's good. But yeah, code enforcement is very important, and that's going to help us a lot in our community.
I agree.
Councilman Kuehl.
I was just curious, is there comparables with other communities, how they're doing with demolitions versus our community, or is there a standard across the country? I have no idea. I just was wondering.
Yeah. You mean as relates to the number of demolition we're doing?
Yeah, I mean, obviously we'd like to do 4 times as many as we're doing, but are we doing pretty good for our community, or?
Sure. Mike, you want to answer this? No, I'm just kidding. So Mike and I and some more staff, we were just in St. Louis last week at a Reclaiming Vacant Properties conference, and we were in a session about demolition. And we had communities in there, they were on fire because they did 35 demolitions. And so we're in there thinking, well, we're in a much better place than that. So to answer your question, and I look at places like Peoria and Springfield and even Bloomington, we are running pace right now with the number of demolitions that those cities are doing. Peoria probably is doing a little bit more than what we're doing for various reasons, but I think we're on pace with neighboring communities.
Well, I've always said that we have roads. We'd like to do more roads. We'd like to tear down more houses. It's all about money. I want to hire a human resources person for French. I want to do a lot of things. It's all about money and trying to figure out where to allocate the dollars.
Councilman Horn, and then to Mr. Manager.
Just a couple of responses to the discussion of demolitions. I mean, I would argue that if the council had the will, we could talk to Public Works Department and say, you know what, why don't we do demolitions in-house? And that might be a way for us to increase the number of demolitions, if we so chose. I'd like to talk a little bit about residential rehab for just a second, right? Because we talk about the 4 pillars, and one of those pillars is residential rehab. And what would be an appropriate pace for us to perform residential rehab? Because if we look at this from a national perspective, there's a housing shortage, certainly an affordable housing shortage, and so we have the opportunity to do residential rehabs. What would be the amount that we would want to do?
So let me answer it this way, if I may. So for the total number of rehabs we've done with American Rescue Plan Act dollars, we've done 4 to 1. We've completed 30 here in 2024. That costs roughly about $3.5 million. Rehab is just as expensive, almost as doing rebuilds, or new builds, I should say, here in the city of Decatur. When I think about when we look at using only community development block grant dollars for owner-occupied rehab, we've done 9 of those at $687,000. We have 3 under contract now for $280,000, right? And so I don't know that we as a government body will ever have the amount of resources needed to do rehab at some scale, right? I think what we're trying to do with the limited resources we have is help change mindsets in our communities so that individuals see that their neighbors are doing better with their home. That's why we have the home buyer program. We're teaching individuals how to properly maintain their homes as well. Much of the issue and challenge we have is that individuals just don't know how to maintain that house, right? When to change the furnace. I mean, how often you should get your gutters cleaned out so you won't have roof problems. And so we're doing those type of things as well to try to help with changing mindsets so that we can begin to change the trajectory of what I'm reading off the paper right now as it relates to what we're spending on to do rehabs. So to answer your question, there is no amount of money that we can have to do those at scale. It takes a lot.
I have a question regarding changing the mindset. Do you have any partners that assist you with this, or is this just something that the city has taken in-house?
Now, we have a ton of partners. We don't do anything alone. And so, as I talked about in the general fund budget, we're partnering with the Community Investment Corporation of Decatur. We're partnering with the EDC. We're partnering with the Land Bank. We're partnering with banks and credit unions that are all putting their toe in the water as it relates to this particular type of project and programs as it relates to housing. We're partnering with a lot of the department staff as well. We work a lot across departments to make these things happen. So we have a lot of partners here in Decatur that we work with.
And on the issue of rehabbing of homes, I hope the mayor will allow me to channel her. There is a balance in the amount of dollars that we put into a rehab. You yourself just said that there are some opportunities that we might be able to build a new house cheaper than what we can rehab. but I think that we do have a partner who is responsible for building new homes, and that's Habitat for Humanity. So with everything that we do in the city, I think there is a very cautious balance. I want to go back to the beginning of what the opening comments of the city manager, in that we're now not operating on COVID dollars or foundation dollars, and we are discussing a property tax increase so that these dollars are coming directly from our citizens. And so given that, I think it's we should be mindful that there will have to be a shift in what we do, and caution.
Couple more. We've talked about catalyst projects, and one of the ones that I think has been going on for a couple of years now is the Great Streets, Great Neighborhood program in Jasper Street. I don't remember the total estimated cost from a couple of years ago, but what kind of funding is expected in the 2025 budget to move that forward?
Yeah, and so this is another opportunity where we partner with Dr. Ann Snyder to build that project out. Is approximately about $10 million. We applied for the engineering phase of the project just last month in partnership with Ann Snyder to get federal funds for that. I would say we applied for the project. We applied for the grant last year, which we were highly recommended for. We included both engineering and construction as part of the grant. In hindsight, we probably should just apply for engineering because the feds want to make sure that, if you haven't done engineering, you say it costs $10 million, that it really does cost $10 million. It won't be $12 million, then you left to figure out how you're going to come up with the other $2 million. So I'm pretty confident that we'll get the engineering grant next year, and once we get the engineering grant and get that going, then we will apply for other different sources, including the Fed and the state, because that would better position us to apply for construction dollars for that project. And so it is about a $10 million project. The infrastructure replacement for Jasper Street is about $10 million, but right now we're looking at trying to get the engineering done.
Next question I have is, for the past 2 years, every 2 years, you have done, we'll call it a survey of the neighborhoods to look at their conditions.
Yeah.
If my recollection is correct, those results will be early 2025. Is that true?
Not early 2025, but we will do the survey again in 2025, yes. So it will be somewhere around March, April when we start it.
And when will it be complete?
In a couple of months after that.
Then finally, just to compliment City Manager Gleason, if I heard him correctly, we might have a plan for neighborhood revitalization, which I think is a fantastic start because we really have not had a plan. We've never had a budget, and therefore, unlike when we talk about cost of roads or sewers or storm sewers, we've never had a dollar amount associated with our needs for the neighborhood. So I compliment City Manager Gleason on bringing that to the council.
Seeing no further questions, I'd like to turn it over to Mr. Manager.
Thank you very much. Appreciate the presentation. Don't go anywhere yet. One comment that I wanted to make back to Councilman Kuehl, it was a question, and then the director spoke to it. When we start comparing ourselves in the residential demos to other communities, we're starting behind. Oftentimes these communities have had an existing program that's been going on for several years. We're fairly new to this game at the levels that we're currently doing now. Councilwoman Gregory and Councilman Horn, there might have been other comments as well, but going back to the initial comments, we have no other option but to bring forward an actual plan because we're talking about local taxpayer dollars trying to fund a very critical need. And this council, this community has to understand what we're investing our dollars in. And then also a level of understanding that there's going to provide a level, a return on investment. And then be able to talk through that. When you talk about, and I'm not there are so many conversations, so many different ways that we could take this, and we're not going to tonight because we're not prepared, but you are going to see Director Patrick more often in the future as it relates to this topic. But if you think about this, when you take a home and rehab it, and there are other entities that can do that. But if you take a home that was slated for demolition or was clearly on that path, and then you sell it for even mid $60,000, that changes the property values in that neighborhood. So it's all these small victories that we truly think that we have an opportunity at, but we have got to be able to tell council a better story than what we have in the past, and that day is coming.
Thank you. Councilman Culp?
Well, I appreciate all the directors and the city manager's comments tonight. Obviously, there's no dreams here. This is a basic needs from each department, and I appreciate that. And even the manpower issues that we're trying to catch back up on, those are needs that our community needs. Last week, we tabled a gas utility tax that I'd like to check the consensus among council members about possibly bringing it back for agenda item, because there is a void, and we need to start thinking about filling that void. I'm just curious who else is interested in bringing that back to agenda.
You and I talk, so you know where I'm coming from. You've heard this before. After we've had discussions, I think this is a two-pronged discussion that we need to have. I think that I know for a fact on the industry side that there's an alternative proposal, and I think we at least owe the courtesy of hearing that.
Yes.
Yes.
I don't think we're quite ready to bring it back. I think we will need to discuss it in the near future, but I think we need to hear the other proposals and really figure out where we are from our budget standpoint, where we want to go, and then that may be a better time to bring it back.
Thank you, Mayor. Councilman Culp, do you have further comments?
No, I don't.
Councilman Kuehl? We'll wrap it up, and then we still have appearance of citizens before we adjourn.
I just wanted to say thank you for putting this all together and to thank all the employees here. I know a lot of you, I think everybody does a great job, so my comments tonight are just trying to be fiscal responsible for this city. There's so many challenges. And with that being said, and the mayor says this a lot, we got to continue to publicize our wins because we do a lot of good things too. And how we get that out, I don't. We have our publicists now, but we need to continue that. Maybe we need a year-end victory lap document of what we've done in the past year to show our citizens that there are a lot of good things that we're doing. It's just when we're in here, we're talking about challenges, and sometimes it gets a little negative, but we have a lot of positive things going on in this community, and we have to keep selling that.
We have a lot of positives on 15.2% of the overall property tax dollars that come into the city. Any other closing comments before I ask the manager to wrap it up? All right, go ahead.
The schedule that we will follow, we have a council meeting next Monday. We're going to be talking budget, at the very least, under city manager comments as touch points along the way. Then we meet again on November 4th. And then I think there is a public hearing scheduled for November 18th. And I might have that wrong, but the schedule is in the proposed budget book. And look forward to the continued conversation, direction. As far as wanted to comment to this because Councilman Culp brought this up. So the $4.2 million deficit, and I wasn't going to bring this up, but with the council action, which was just tabling the item, that was $3.5 million towards this $4.2 million deficit. I realize the gas use tax is something that this council has heard about for the past 3 years as one of many type of new revenue streams. My approach to this in a very quick 5 months was trying to find something that was the fairest and the most equitable, and I believe we have. That's ultimately going to be council's decision. Absent the increase in the property tax that I am proposing, again, council's decision, there is nothing else that I'm bringing before council asking you to consider that I would argue or contend is on the backs of the residents that probably can't bear anything more. So that's sort of the thought process behind this. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Manager. All right, at this time, we have appearance of citizens. Policy relative to appearance of citizens, a 30-minute time period is provided for citizens to appear and express their views before the City Council. Each citizen speaking will be limited to one appearance of up to 3 minutes. No immediate response will be given by City Council or City staff members. Citizens are to give their documents, if any, to the police officer for distribution to the Council. When the mayor determines that all persons wishing to speak in accordance with this policy have done so, members of the City Council and key staff may make comments. If we have anyone that has comments that they would like to provide, please come to the podium. All you need to do is give us your name. Thank you.
And Manager, can you run the clock? Thank you.
Good evening. I'm still Ann Owens. First of all, Mayor, I looked it up just to double check my memory. Clay told you it would cost $400,000 to run the center. He was looking for $150,000 in other funding. So that's why he's asking you for the additional, I think, $28,000. Okay. So the very first thing that I definitely want to address is a DUI police officer. I am the daughter of a mother that was hit by a drunk driver. A Decatur police officer saved my mother's life. So if there's one thing that certainly is important to me, it's that you fund anything that this gentleman asked for. Okay? There. So, Shane, you got yeah, I know. Yeah. So he's got a big fan in me. So I also wanted to point out that I know often we come here with gripes, complaints that we've heard from citizens or that we're giving for ourselves. But I will tell you, people like Byron, Rick at the Municipal Services, these people, Manuel, have worked at the city almost my entire adult life, okay? So you've got so many people here that are so valuable and wonderful, wonderful people. I'm always respectful to them. I may disagree with people over time, but I'm certainly respectful to all of you, and I'm very appreciative for your staff. They always do try to be very professional when we meet, and like I said, we've had disagreements. I also want to point out that Patrick should probably mention that he has a good partnership with CONA. So the Coalition of Neighborhood Organizations, our meetings tomorrow night. You can join us at 5:30 at the library. But we're certainly willing to partner more with the city, perhaps host some type of neighborhood revitalization meetings. So some of the outreach, we'll be having a big party in December year in. That might be a good time to announce the wins of the city. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Owens. Are there others? Do council members have any follow-up comments?
So moved.
Second.
Councilman Gregory,
Aye.
Councilman Horn,
Aye.
Councilman Kuehl,
Aye.
Councilman Culp,
Aye.
Councilman Cooper, Councilman McDaniel,
Aye.
Mayor Moore Wolf.
Aye.
6 ayes, 1 nay. I'm sorry. 6 ayes, and that's it, 6 ayes. We are adjourned, I'm sorry.